So this morning, we are diving into Lent. I don't know if you know that, but it's Lent time. I feel like I may have said this in Advent too, but ignore that. This is the real one. Lent might be my favorite time of the year. I love the just understanding of Lent, this like transitional season, but also how it's represented in the time of Lent. Starting, we're going to get what? Like, we got like 6 feet of, not 6 feet, like 6 inches of snow yesterday. We're going to get some more tomorrow. And then by the time Lent ends, it's spring. You got the joyous birds, flowers, everything around. So I just love that transition through that season. And so, for our Lent series, we are going to look at what it is to be in the wilderness. A couple weeks ago, we talked about Jesus' time in the wilderness. After his baptism, the Spirit takes him into the wilderness. And that seemed to really strike a chord. So what I wanted to do is just sit in that time for the next 40 days. And Jesus' time in the wilderness, a lot happened. But Jesus' time in the wilderness isn't the only kind of wilderness moment we have in the Bible. We have the children of Israel, that after they escape from Egypt, they wander in the wilderness of Zin for decades. And they grow, they learn, a lot happens to them in there. We have Jonah, is another one of my favorite kind of wilderness people. We think of Jonah as, oh yeah, he gets swallowed by the great fish and all that. But if you take a slow read of that book, I love the beginning chapters of it. Verbs are all talking about Jonah descending. He goes down to Tarshish. He goes down to the bottom of the ship. He goes down, down, down until the song, the poem he sings, he talks about, I am literally in the belly of Sheol. I am as far down as I can get. That was his wilderness experience. And we will all have our own wilderness experiences. Probably a lot of them, if we're going to be honest. But what does it mean to be in the wilderness? We should have some kind of definition of what we're talking about. So for me, I look at wilderness times as times when we're tested. Times when we feel pushed to our breaking point. And if we're honest, a lot of times past our breaking point to ourselves. There are times when we feel emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally desolate, lonely. When we feel just agonizing. We think of these moments and we feel they're times of longing, times of thirst, times of hunger. Sometimes physical, but more often than not, different kind of hunger. Hungering for something that's going to happen in the future. Or hungering or longing for something that was in the past. So the question is, what are these times meant for? What are we to take from these moments, from these wilderness times? How can we learn to make maybe subsequent ones less intense? How can we recognize them when they're happening? Or maybe, how can we learn how to help others that are going through a wilderness time, that maybe we've gone through something similar? So each week, we are going to look at some key element of what it means to be in the wilderness. It's going to be wilderness as blank. And then talk about it, and hopefully we will kind of see the journey that we go through when we're kind of in that wilderness time, when we feel desolate, when we feel cast out. And hopefully how we are forced to grow in some measurable way. We'll hopefully spin it as a positive, measurable way you grow, but we'll walk through it as we get there. So to start with, before we even get to the topic today, I want to just read our kind of base passage. So the main passage we're going to use is the Matthew account of Jesus driven into the wilderness. So I want to just kind of read through that, and then we'll come back to it over the next, however many weeks, touching base on it a lot, but I want to just kind of get it into our head to start with right now. So this is Matthew 4, starting in verse 1. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights. Afterward, he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But Jesus answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes through the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. For it is written, He will command his angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up so that you will not dash your foot against a stone. Jesus said to him, again it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test. But again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, all of these I will give to you, if you fall down and worship me. Jesus said to him, away with you, Satan. For it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him. The devil left him, and suddenly the angels came to wait on him. So for our first topic, what I want to do is look at our wilderness time as a time of learning. Now, how many of you have heard the phrase, you learning the hard way, right? Academically, this is called an accelerated learning experience. Or as my mom always called them, you won't do that again, will you, learning time. We can have them personally. We can also have them as a society. Think of COVID. Studies are starting to emerge that as a society, as a culture, we jumped almost a decade during that 2-year period because we were forced to. I think that's especially true in the life of the church. Think about how much churches had to adapt, change, modify what they were doing in that 2-year period. Now, a lot of that was probably stuff that was going to happen eventually. We were on that track. Probably would have happened closer to the end of the 20s, right? 28, 29. But because of everything that happened, we were forced to do it in a 2-year period. Otherwise, a lot of churches would have closed. Our wilderness times are things like this. They are bastions for this kind of learning. Because really, they force us to learn. And I think one of the most common things that we learn in the wilderness is what is most important in our lives. Who is most important, what values we have, all of that. Now, I want to look at the timing of things. Timing of Jesus' cast out into the wilderness. Because remember, it is immediately after his baptism. This super high moment when the Spirit of God descends down, there's a voice from the heavens, the entire Trinity is present. It is just this absolute high moment. And then it says the Spirit forced him out into the desert. Now, I really like this painting because that is a Jesus we don't often think about. And if we do, that's a Jesus we think about maybe in the Garden of Gethsemane. That is a face of someone who is broken in this moment. And this is before ministry ever started. That is a face of someone who was scared. And that may be weird to think about, Jesus being scared. But I think you can say he was. And so I love this humanity in this painting. The idea that Jesus goes through these same wilderness times we do and experiences the same way. Because it can be easy for us to think about, well, yeah, he was in the wilderness, but he was God, so it's not quite the same thing as me. But it was. So Jesus kicked out into the wilderness at the moment after a spiritual high, and what happens? He's tempted. He's tempted by wealth, by fame, by power. All things which, by the way, Satan could have given him. Because if you notice the passage we read, when Satan talks about, I can give you all the kingdoms of the world, Jesus doesn't say, no, you couldn't, because he could. So it wasn't an empty promise Satan was giving. Satan could have given him this world. But Jesus said, no, that is not what is important right now. Jesus had to decide what was going to be most important in his life and his ministry in that moment. Was it going to be acquiring wealth, acquiring fame for himself as a person, acquiring power? No. He decided it was going to be about the message. It was going to be about salvation, not the personage that he was gathering people around him. He wanted the message to disseminate, to gather. Same thing is true with the children of Israel. Think about their exile. When they leave Egypt, they are not a country, a nation. They are borderline, not even a group of people that like each other very much. One of the first stories we hear is they immediately are like, we've made a bad decision. We don't like being on our own. Can we go back? But think about them at the end of their journey. During this time, they learn how to be a nation. They learn what it means to be a people group under their God. And it sets them forward on the trajectory for the next couple hundred years of who they are going to be culturally, who they're going to be economically. This time is where they learn what it is to be the children of Israel. So, as we follow Jesus, and as we follow the nation of Israel into wilderness times, we are forced to reconcile with these questions. We're forced to really evaluate our values, who we are. Going into the wilderness is painful. It's probably not the most pastoral way to put it, but going into the wilderness sucks. It's not fun. But it cannot be denied that the wilderness times is where we grow the most, where we grow the most spiritually. Arguably, when things are good, we don't really grow. We coast, we ride. So, what are the questions we can ask ourselves when we find ourselves in the wilderness? What are the things we can try to evaluate from a big level perspective? So I came up with 3 questions that I personally have wrestled with in wilderness times. Though these aren't the only questions you can wrestle with, but maybe they can inspire you to think of what are the things you wrestle with. So the first question I came up with is, who are the people that are most important in your life? Because wilderness times can really highlight who are the people that love you. Who are the people God has put in your life to help you? So I know for me, personally, when I was at my absolute lowest, the people that I always assumed my entire life would be there to help me, family, friends, weren't. Because suddenly, I wasn't the person they knew. Suddenly, I was the one that needed help, and that didn't fit well with them. But a person I barely knew became the only tie I had, the only thing keeping me going. A person I barely knew. I had known a month, maybe. And that was the person that helped pull me through. That was the person God said, no, this person is going to be in your life. So think about that for you. Are there times when you have been in the wilderness, when you have been down? Who were the people that God put there to help you? Who were the people that God said, that is the person I want in your life? Because one of those times that often make that abundantly clear. Another question we could ask ourselves in the wilderness times: what is God calling me to do with my life? Now, this could be on a grand scale, what job, what area, should I move? But it could also be on a smaller scale too. Are there small missional areas God is calling me to? Are there areas in the community, in the church, that God is calling me to? So for me, this was a big one. So some of you know, being a pastor is really my third career. I started out as an archaeologist for a number of years. Decided to shift from that into academia. So I did go to a seminary school. I went there not to go into ministry, but because that school happened to have one of the best Hebrew professors in the country and one of the best Old Testament scholars in the country. And that's what I was studying, so that's where I went. Plan was finish up school there, go on, get a PhD, teach. That had been my plan forever. And it was going very well. Went to seminary. While in seminary, you have to intern at church because it is a seminary. So I did. And over the course of the last few years there, I started to get torn. Because I was really feeling more fulfillment out of my role at that church than I was in teaching, than I was in academia, than I was in writing. But I'm super stubborn. And so when I graduated, I said, nope, the plan has always been since I was little, go on to a PhD program. So I did. I went to the University of Wisconsin to start a PhD program in Semitic languages. And even before I got there, there should have been kind of some red flags going up, but I am terrible at reading red flags, apparently. on my trip up there, after I was accepted to meet everyone, there was a particular professor that I had gone specifically to study under. She took me out to lunch and informed me she had just taken a new job as the dean at Johns Hopkins. Well, that's not great, but this is still a good school. Like, it's still a really good program. I'm going to stay. It was not great. It didn't fit with what I wanted because the people that were left weren't in the same field as the person that had left, so it wasn't great to begin with. And then I got one final kind of, I say, drop kick upside the head from God. The program itself was a joint program with classics, so like Greek literature and such, and Hebrew Bible. The trustees decided that classics was way more important than Hebrew Bible. So most of the funding got shifted over to classics, meaning I had no funding left. So suddenly, something that I'd been working for decades, in one meeting is gone. Talk about being thrown into a wilderness time. So it was there that I actually listened to God, that I probably should have done years ago, and decided to go into ministry. So sometimes wilderness times are God slapping you upside the head saying, listen. I don't know how many people are fans of the Legend of Zelda games, particularly Ocarina of Time. There is a character that if you play that game, you know what it is. It is that annoying little fairy that every 30 seconds pops in, hey, listen, listen. I feel like that's the Holy Spirit sometimes. And we just ignore it. And it always ends up bad for us. The last question that has been important for me in my wilderness times is, what am I taking for granted in my life right now? What are the things God has put in my life that I am not appreciating? And the wilderness time that really brought this into stark relief for me was when my mom died. So my mom died of cancer. She fought it for a number of years, and she was amazing going through it. But for her last few months, I was lucky enough that I was able to be one of her primary caretakers. So I lived in Missouri at the time, she lived in Montana. I was able to fly back and forth because it was a weird benefit, because it was COVID, that everything my church was doing was remote. So I could do it from Montana. So I did. And one of the things my mom absolutely loved doing was making gift baskets for bridal showers, but mostly for baby showers. This was the thing she loved most in the world. And I always thought it was that's cute, that's fun. She would make me go with her a lot. But when I was up there was one she wanted to do. Reflecting back on it, it was 2 weeks before she passed. She was like, I am doing this basket. I am hosting this baby shower. So I went with her. She picked out all the stuff, did all the wrapping while she's judging my terrible wrapping, all of that. But in that moment, it made me just realize how much I took my mom for granted. Of course my mom's always going to be there. The dumb things we do. Going out shopping. It was that moment that I realized I just sometimes take the people in my life for granted. Never even thought about the fact that something happens, I can't call my mom. Hey mom, what was this recipe? Oh, I can't do that anymore. Those recipes are gone. And so for me, this was a big one. This wilderness time that got highlighted of, do not take for granted the people that I've put in your life. So what might that be for you? What are the things, the people, the places in your life that you maybe take for granted? So think about these type of questions. Reflect back on wilderness times you have been in. What did you learn? What did you prioritize in your life as a result of that wilderness time? And are you still prioritizing that? Or did it kind of wane away when you got outside of that time? Who were the people that rose up in your life during those moments? Are they still part of your life? Or did you kind of fall back to your old patterns? If you are currently in a wilderness time, do any of these questions resonate? If not, what are the questions that could resonate with you in this moment? I think it's interesting because I feel like we can subconsciously, voluntarily just sit and stay in the wilderness. I know I've done it. We find ourselves in a wilderness time, and we shut down. We don't know what to do, so we just sit. So often, the first thing we can do to even begin crawling forward out of these times, out of these deserts, is to ask questions. Ask, what are we supposed to learn, do, glean from this time? Because they're not good times. But is there anything good that can come out of it for me? We have to try to assess what we are, who we are, and what we are to be as a result of this wilderness time. Because you will not be the same person leaving this time that you were going in. Hopefully, you'll be a different, better person. And I will say can be very tempting to say, no. This wilderness time is pushing me to my villain era. That is never the right answer. It's very tempting sometimes, but that is never the right answer. So wrestle with these kind of questions. Wrestle with the big ideas. Who am I as a person? What do I value? Who are the people in my life? What is God trying to get through to me in this moment? How is God trying to get me to grow? Let God breathe understanding and enlightenment into you during these moments. Work on lifting your head so that you can even begin to see your path out, your way forward through the wilderness, and to be the person that God wants you to be when you finally do get to that point. Join me as we pray.